Hello, and welcome back to this is part 5. Can you believe it?
Yeah,
Uh,
I can. I can, because I did say before we started I'd make progress slowly, and
yeah.
so I have.
Well, it's funny because if you want to show how much of a fool I am, I um I predicted that this was going to go slowly, and so I thought I was safe to just put in calculate sheets in the spreadsheet through the year 2003. We are on 1998. If we can somehow get through 2003 in the next 2 hours, we will have run out of stuff, and I will have to go in and go make more. I'm already planning on extending it for next stream, but if we can get through 6 years in one day,
Yeah, that would be something. I would have thought, given the volume of releases, I
yeah.
would assume generally is kind of trending upwards with the handheld kind of
Yeah.
resurgence that we're facing.
2000, very weak year because
That
everything is on its way out.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you got stuff on the way out that year, but so if we're going to get to '03, we'd have to get through the kind of handheld boom as well as
Yep,
other
it's
stuff.
true.
So
All right.
yeah, no, I wouldn't. Although I suppose once we do get into the 21st century, there's a bit less of the kind of through the mists of time fact, kind of element to assessing this stuff
Yes.
because it's more just solidly like in the online era, and just easier to remember and all that kind of thing.
Yes. No. I'm looking forward to when the first time when a game comes up and you say, "Well, I reviewed that."
Yeah, I didn't. I reviewed precious few games, fewer still of merit. But because it was a problem if I was getting assigned something, because it'd be like, well, you've got to ship the
Yeah.
game to
Well, didn't you
me.
reduce Sin and Punishment too?
I did. That was the last one. And that was just because I played the game thoroughly after importing it and everything. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was and like Banjo and
Yeah.
Mario Kart Wii, and I review good games, but there was just yeah, there aren't many. But yeah,
And
so
nothing before
Mario.
2003.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Harvest Moon for the Super Nintendo in 1998. So this
Yeah,
is
I mean,
solidly in the N64 era.
yeah. If I had to guess, I just would have said it didn't come out over here
Oh
at
no.
all, or yeah, like I'm
Super late.
surprised that it's so very late. But I don't really have any experience with Harvest Moon at all.
Oh.
I only sort of know it somewhat by reputation.
Mm.
And I think this, the Super Nintendo original is fairly well thought of.
Yeah, it's really Harvest Moon hits its peak of popularity around GameCube GBA.
Yeah, that's certainly
Um
when I became more aware of it,
yeah.
even though I didn't actually play it.
And that's when they also start putting out basically 1 to 2 games a year. And that's when like Natsume becomes the Harvest Moon global publisher. Like just like
Yeah,
that is our brand. Is we do Harvest Moon. And then of course Story of Seasons happens. But
the schism.
yes, that's neither here nor there. This is the original Super Nintendo release of Harvest Moon.
Yeah, so obviously I've not got a great basis for this, but maybe a 7. It seems
Okay.
about safe and correct, maybe.
Um, we were talking at the end of last stream about how this is pretty much the Nintendo of Europe year. So let's get into it. Cruisin' USA. Don't worry, there's another Cruisin' game coming out also in this year.
Yeah, I mean, I remember. I mean, the main thing I remember about this being covered is when it was, as an import review, so a long time before
Oh, a
this.
long time. Launch title in America.
Yeah, so which made sense from the but we touched on this last week. Like this and Killer Instinct
Mm-hmm.
Gold, it was like essentially fulfilling the quote unquote promise of those arcade games, the corresponding arcade games as part of the Ultra 64, kind of hype
Yes.
machine. But they even when Cruising USA came out in America, it was a bit late for that to really, like it didn't really carry any much wow factor anymore, and so it didn't review especially well as I recall. Mate, that and Killer Instinct Gold to some extent, but I think Cruising USA is a little worse. I have played the arcade game very, very sparingly, once or twice over the years, and it seemed okay. It kind of seemed like a, kind of more polygonal kind of take on an outrun type of racer. But I think a 5 is probably going to be appropriate for this. Might be generous. I do. Some people really didn't like that, but it's hard for me to say.
Tetrosphere.
Another
Another
one
sequel.
Yeah, and another Tetris product. So this just sort of keeps going. And again, it's a bit tenuous. Its connection to Tetris, but I recall this. This was one that some liked quite a lot, and then others much less so. So having not played it myself, it's kind of difficult.
It's no Tetris.
Yes. I do remember that being covered. Again, it was importing N64 games or any puzzle game seemed a bit extravagant. It would have had to, kind of go back to some of the good puzzlers on Super Nintendo. It's like that seems like it would be fun, but you have to a puzzle game has to really click with you to be kind of worth that kind of premium, which is totally possible. And like if you really get into it, it's kind of super addictive. You can end up spending loads of time with it, but it does that happen? And if it doesn't, then even if you could say like this is a good game and it's you can't really fault it, it wouldn't be worth the money. So yeah, Tetrosphere was never under serious consideration of getting purchased, but I think it was of some merit. I think it's just a little torn between a 6 and a 7 here. I'm gonna go with a 6.
Okay. Yoshi's Story.
Yeah, they did not have this originally. Basically, again, same thing with the import premium.
You read how long it was?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, and also some of the criticism of the substance of the game as well. It wasn't just that it was brief. If brevity was an absolute stone cold killer, I never would have had Sin and Punishment years later. Because it was like very short. But the substance stuff also kind of just that the ways in which it was different from Yoshi's Island. Not that I was like it must be exactly like Yoshi's Island. Like I kind of welcome it being somewhat different. I further it, but just it sounded like it was ways in which I wasn't that enthused about. Kind of the fewer levels and the kind of way that you kind of have to basically run through the game a whole bunch of times to see this smaller selection of levels.
Yep.
The pre-rendered style didn't really, I didn't think it was. I wasn't really against the pre-rendered graphics in general. Like, although I really liked the way the original Yoshi's Island looked, but I didn't think it was a great fit for Yoshi. Even though, like, when you look at the screenshots at the time, there were certain aspects that were quite charming. The kind of handmade element of it, the kind of more the specificity of kind of all the underground being made out of newspaper and all. It gave it a bit more personality than just the kind of plastic CG look. But I did play it years later, and I think it's got some merits, but and it's so weird. It's like a time where the holy grail for a lot of sort of developers at the time was like, okay, we all sort of knew where we were doing 2D platformers, and now we need to figure out what to do with 3D. How do we make a 3D platformer? And Nintendo had already done this with Mario 64, and so with Yoshi, it's just like, okay, how do we basically put the sort of template, the kind of tenets of what we've done with 3D platformers into a 2D one? It's like, because there is no real end to the level. It just wraps around and it just goes until you've eaten the 30 pieces of fruit and all. It's very much like putting 3D platformer kind of structure onto a 2D one, and not entirely successfully. But there's still things I like. So I think a six. It's 5.5, but six probably.
Okay. What about 1080 degree snowboarding?
Yeah, this was one that reviewed well, in what I was reading, and seemed quite tempting. But it was a victim of like a have wave race. Obviously, there's differences; they're not the same game at all, But it's a little bit close for me to go for it. And I've never actually revisited because it was on Virtual Console, right? So I
Yeah.
guess it just passed me by somehow. I don't I don't really
Yeah,
know.
this one's been re-released. Like it's like
Yeah.
there are games of this era, especially of this era, that just do not get re-released, especially because this is when like especially a lot of Nintendo published games end up having licenses attached to them.
Yeah, oh
Um,
yeah, or just games that were kind of big on N64 if they weren't published by Nintendo, but whereas like games that were big on Super Nintendo would get re-released because they were Japanese developed. So
yep,
many Japanese developers had abandoned ship that the kind of big third-party games left were Western, and they have a much spottier, like, and that's really
exactly.
understating it, record of getting re-releases, especially through Virtual Console and stuff. But no, this did, and I still haven't gone to it. So I mean, is this confirmed for expansion pack, or I
I don't
assume
think it has been confirmed for expansion pack. I believe it has been data mined for expansion pack.
yes. Well, I mean, it seems it's fairly inevitable, and so I imagine I'll give it a try at that time. But no, it again seems like it was pretty respectable kind of take on this kind of game. Something that again, I think if it really clicked you could have held a lot of appeal, but it seemed a bit frivolous for a purchase back then. But I think a 7 will be appropriate for that one.
How about Kobe Bryant in NBA courtside?
Yeah, again, I read about this a fair bit. Never did play it. But I don't. The reputation of it is hard because I'm sure there were other NBA games around at the time, and it's like exactly which one. I'm pretty with Kobe being such a big star at the time, you kind of remember that. But in terms of the actual substance of the game, that's a bit harder. And yeah, I didn't. I mean, I had like the NFL. Played NFL game on the N64, but not NBA, and so I'll go with a 6 on that one.
What about Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey Jr. for the N64?
Yeah, I remember the Super Nintendo one getting sort of more coverage than this for whatever reason. I don't know whether it's just because it was, for British magazines. So it's all right, yeah, it's another Ken Griffey get fight. Like we're not particularly fussed at this point. That any kind of novelty worn off. But yeah, as best I can recall, it was a sort of respectable baseball game. The one I had was All Star Baseball, which was out of Acclaim's sports range. They had Quarterback Club and All Star Baseball and a few others, I think. But that tended to review better, I think. So another 6.
Cruisin' World, same
Mm,
year as Cruisin' USA. I think about 6 months apart.
absolutely crazy. I don't know like who to sort of do I mark down a particular game for this, and like which one of the two should carry the can for coming out? So I mean, probably Cruising World carries it a little bit more, just because I would imagine Cruising USA probably had a little bit more name cachet, just from being promoted more in the arcades and stuff, and then this is coming out shortly afterwards. It probably yeah, it didn't help matters for it in terms of just like, okay, there's another one, big deal kind of thing, especially with the cost of N64 games. So, yeah, I really am not familiar with the merits of it. I just kind of checked out a bit on Cruising, especially by 98. It just kind of seemed like it was, passe or whatever. So maybe a 4.
Okay. What about Banjo Kazooie?
Yeah, so this was kind of a big game for me. I had it for the school summer holiday. That you got your 6 weeks off or whatever. This is a good time to have one of your choices, your import games for the year, the American Banjo Kazooie, and yeah, I really quite enjoyed playing that for a couple of weeks or so in that summer. It was obviously very patterned on Mario 64 in a lot of ways. You probably kind of ironed some things out, some of the basic things that I think it kind of that I liked better about it anyway. The fact that you could just kind of keep going when you got a jiggy. It wasn't like a specific instance, and therefore you had to be warped out of the level. Once you'd collected one, and then and go back in
Hmm.
if you wanted to keep going. Like you just keep exploring at your leisure. You kind of had the whole thing of acquiring moves, which um, I guess it was good and bad with that in terms of maybe in some ways it could be looked at as something that's like trying to lengthen the game out a bit in terms of you wouldn't just be able to like absolutely find everything straight away because you wouldn't have the move set potentially to do it. Obviously it's hardly Metroid, but there's a little element of that to kind of drag the game out a little bit more, you could say, but it does make the world feel a bit more kind of interesting in terms of that you don't just kind of take it at face value the first time. You kind of have to think about, oh well, I'll have to kind of remember that, or how is this gonna sort of be resolved by a future power or something like that. But overall, there was pluses and minuses, but I think it was a pretty good kind of version of this sort of nascent genre at the time. So I think I give it an 8.
Okay. That game does not hold up, and I look forward to people figuring that out when it comes to NSO. That this is around the time that Rare started putting a lot of weirdly out of place tribal racism in every single one of their games.
No, I wonder about stuff like that. I think I played a little bit of it on Rare Replay a few years ago
Uh
now.
huh.
It's the fact that it's portable, portable play. I think I'd be able to kind of investigate it, revisit it a bit more
Yeah, the
thoroughly.
gameplay in a lot of like this through um the Viva Pinata games and Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts still, for some reason, they just keep wanting to put tribal aesthetics and imagery in their games, and no
Yeah,
one keeps
that's
slapping their hands and saying, "No, you're white."
don't do it. They were a strange bunch. I mean, I wouldn't have. I don't know whether I would have necessarily offhand, kind of connected the dots on although when you mention it, it's like, well, yeah, they did, didn't
Like
they? With
mumbo
with
jumbo,
yeah,
huh?
with Banjo straight away, it's just like, yeah, Mumbo would be the first. There's another one in the sequel. There's
Yes.
another, basically the same gag,
Yeah,
but
they
with a different
sure keep
character.
doing that, and it's like,
Well,
what the fuck are you
th-
doing?
they were a strange bunch in terms of like very steadfastly committed to sort of puerile comedy
Mm-hmm.
and stuff that would seem to be mostly for the sake of amusing themselves, which and I guess also, but well, a lot of these games are ostensibly sort of like core audience kids or whatever, so it's like the puerile stuff will go over well with them, but equally, like some of the stuff that's in there to amuse us will go over their heads or whatever. I don't know. They was the worst is something. The worst reference they ever kind of put in a game that I know of is in Jet Force Gemini. So perhaps we'll get to that later.
Yes, we will. Oh, yes, we will. F Zero X at 50 hertz.
Yeah, so this is a tough one because I think you have to penalise this pretty heavily, maybe more so than the Super Nintendo, because of course the thing about F Zero X is that it sacrificed a great deal, really. Compared to since the original F-Zero, it was a long time, really, wasn't it? Between F-Zero and F-Zero X, although things had happened in between, like with the Satellaview and things in Japan, but for us, outside of people who were having those like weird events broadcast to them, it was a long time, and especially in Britain, like the futuristic racer genre was a thing at this point. Like it kept going in F Zero's kind of absence, especially with Wipeout, and on
Yep.
N64. Wipeout. There was a Wipeout 64, wasn't there?
Uh,
But also like Extreme G or whatever it was called. Like there were a few. You get the pod racer stuff in '99. So it was kind of this genre unto itself, and the way
this is the same
Nintendo
year as Wipeout 64. Yep.
the way Nintendo tackled it was, we are going to strip back the aesthetics to make 60 frames possible. So everything is super bare bones. The backgrounds are really abstract. And I mean, this was especially a big call to make, a big sacrifice to make. In the era of screenshots are pretty much everything. Like the internet video is not really a thing.
Certainly
And
not at that bit rate.
no, so what's it? Yeah, exactly. Like, how is that going to demonstrate the 60 frames anyway, even if you had video of it? So it's like you put it in a screenshot, and what you see is, low poly cars and foggy plain backgrounds. Like, so this was, I think, a kind of really admirable decision to like prioritize what was going to make it play well, even if it was not going to look that sexy compared to some of the other races and specifically futuristic races out there and all that. But of course, you do that, and then the 50 hertz thing kind of undoes that work.
Sure does.
It's surreal. I mean, for me, I had to warm up a bit to F-Zero X actually, because I guess I loved F-Zero the original so much. Some of the changes that it made with like fewer laps and the way the boosts changed, and the 30 car kind of field, it felt a lot more kind of like chaotic and not as structured as like the original, where it's like, okay, well look, you're always going to have the other three like proper hovercrafts or whatever they are, in front of you to take down, and then when you do that, like there's always these back markers that can kind of fuck things up for you, just like they're weaving around in the wrong part of the track, like whereas with F-Zero X it's a bit different. Like if you got in front, like you were in the clear while everybody else is just kind of killing each other and going crazy. So I took a while to warm up to it, but once I did, I really, really liked it, and I think it would be a 9. But yeah, with this compromise, I think 7. Sad, but
Yeah. Wild Country Club, True Golf Classics.
yeah, I've not played this, but I have played some of a game that's very similar, which is like many years ago now. There was a dirt cheap copy of a Augusta game for the Japanese N64, made by the same people. I think it's T&E Soft, if I'm not mistaken. And at that time, Augusta games just didn't really escape Japan for whatever reason. They were quite willing to license the course out to be in video games in Japan only, but it was beneath them to let them be playable elsewhere. And that kind of came to an end sometime in the 2010s or something, when there was a Tiger Woods Masters game. But yeah, before that, it was just like if you wanted to play a video game with the Augusta golf course in it, it had to be a Japanese one. And I bought this really cheap thing. Oh well, it's a video game with Augusta in it. Like it'd be kind of interesting. And it's not a bad, it's kind of. I guess probably compared to latter, more simulation type golf games, it's a bit ropey, and it's not as fun as stuff like Mario Golf in terms of in the video gamey kind of way. But it was a respectable take, so I'm assuming this is much the same game but just with a different course. I think a 6 is probably appropriate.
Okay. Um. What are your thoughts on Ocarina of Time? 50
Yeah,
hertz.
well, it's a big one, isn't it? It really was the last time in my life I can remember being ridiculously excited for Christmas Day, because we had imported it, but I was quite steadfast in those days, and for a few years after, in terms of like, no, I'll save it for Christmas. This was, to me, playing, the big video game was as much a part of Christmas Day as, the dinner and the family and everything else. Go all the way back to, we talked about opening the NES on Christmas Day in 1987 with Punch Out. So, I didn't play it for those weeks, even though I knew it was in the house. It was killing me. And the excitement just, it was, like I said, I'll never feel that again, because I've mostly lost the capacity for excitement in
Oh,
the
come
years
on.
hence. But, it lived up to it in many ways. I mean, in some ways you could say the excitement was so great that maybe, you kind of overestimated it in some respects, but equally it was a lot to live up to, and it did for the most part, because the reviews were just so overwhelmingly positive, and it's been this thing you've been looking forward to for so many years, and I loved Link to the Past and all that. So yeah, it was a heavy burden, but I think for the most part, it did the job really, really well when it had so much pressure on it. And I guess a lot of that was because they gave themselves enough time to actually get it right. I don't know what if they'd released when they'd originally kind of intended it to release, it probably would have been a much lesser game. And this is something that when we get to the GameCube era, you will see some differences. But even though I'm sure the bordering and the 50 hertz and all didn't do it any favors, I'll stick with a 9 for this.
Okay. Bomberman Hero. This is the one with the story mode.
Yeah, so I can remember reading about this and just like, a story mode focus bomber.
Yeah.
Being a little bit baffled, but I don't think it was particularly meant to be bad, was it? I just
No.
odd.
Yeah, it's interesting. For reference, you gave the Bomberman game that came out the previous year a 5.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking probably another 5, but I mean that might be a little bit harsh.
Okay.
Because I've not played it, but
Before you say it's a little harsh, might I direct your attention to the fact that there are 3 Bomberman games that came out in Europe in 1998.
Wow. Yes, I can see. I mean,
There are 3 of them, so don't feel that bad.
Yeah, well, we'll go with that then.
Okay. Gotta love the glove. What about Glover?
Yeah, like I said, the main thing I remember this for is that there was in '98. It definitely had got to the point where I was really phasing out reading the what had become the official Nintendo magazine. It sort of, back in the 16-bit days, you had Mean Machines, which was a computer video game sort of console spin-off. And then a few years into the 16-bit era, that split off into Nintendo and Sega dedicated publications. And then, that became the official Nintendo kind of magazine, which it meant that it wasn't, the import stuff and the, kind of more direct, like critical appraisal faded away and all that. So I didn't really. I mostly got like the other the from future publishers like Super Play and N64 magazine, which didn't had more independence and talked a lot about import stuff. But I do remember that for whatever reason I saw and I had the official Nintendo magazine issue with Glover on the cover. I'm pretty sure this happened.
Glover cover.
And it was kind of like, bloody hell.
Here we are.
Isn't it? It's like, what? Yeah, I mean, there were these times where it's like, we're all just waiting for Game X to come out, or Game Y has been delayed, or
what are we gonna have on the cover this month? Who's willing to pay?
Yeah, that's like
Nintendo wants us to put Glover? Are you kidding me?
I have no idea how well this actually turned out. That is the only sort of mental association I have.
It's a better mascot platformer than Bubsy, but it's like in the Arrow the Acrobat realm of whatevers.
Yeah, let's go with a 4.
Okay.
Again, it's tough when you've not played things, but
All right, that's it for Super Nintendo and N64. Now on to Game Boy Black and White. And keep in mind, for context, this is also the year that Game Boy Color launched in Europe.
yeah.
So again, 4 systems this year. For Game Boy Black and White, James Bond 007.
Yeah, well, it's after the GoldenEye thing blows up on N64, and again we've seen this a few times where you get these kind of products. The fighting games, the Donkey Kong Lands, like all this kind of stuff. Where it's like we're just gonna kind of cash in, but I don't know how sort of bad or not this was, because like latterly there was some in that vein that like weren't supposed to be all that bad. Like I think there was a GBC Perfect Dark game that some people actually quite liked.
My understanding was that this one is, let's call it, fine.
Yeah, so
Would you believe that James Bond 007 has bad SEO?
really, no.
That's a hard thing to search for.
It's just so few other things that you could be meaning when you.
Yes, alright. This is.
How many films are they up to? Like 20 odd?
Something, yes. I'm looking at reception. Yeah, it's around like 6s and 7s. Gameplay was compared to The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening.
Yeah, good top down kind of makes sense. Like I said, I mean, maybe it was kind of in that sort of lineage that the Perfect Dark game sort of ended up being, because that was top down, and obviously it was Metal Gear,
Yes.
Ghost Babel and all that. So yeah, you had these kinds of things, but I doubt it was probably as up to the level of those. We'll give it a 5.
Wario Land 2.
Yeah, like this one. It was one of these that sort of sounded intriguing, but it was before I had a Game Boy, so didn't get it at the time. Came back around. My first Wario Land would be Wario Land 4 for GBA, which obviously carries over a certain amount of things from Wario Land 2 and 3, but not everything, especially the structure and you're sort of having hearts and things. It's different from 2 and 3 where you can't die. But it has like transformations and various things that come from these 2 games. But I think 2 is, I feel like 3 is sort of a bit more ambitious, which is good and bad. But 2 is kind of more straightforward, but it still has some really cool kind of twists on typical kind of platformers at the time, that really separated. It's just such a crowded field, especially I presume on portables. You'd been kind of you'd had your fill probably by that time. I guess maybe it was coming round again. It had been long enough, but I think an 8 for this one is appropriate. It's very, very good.
Okay. Bomberman GB.
Yeah, so is this from like years past elsewhere? I've got to assume like.
I believe the answer is no. I think there were this many Bomberman releases in NOA also. Let me double check. I am pulling this up. Oh no, nope. You are right. We are looking at like 1994.
It really does feel like just one of these things where it's like, okay, we even though Pokemon is still not, it's a year away, and you.
Oh no, hang on, I might be getting this wrong. So this is the game released in Europe. Okay, this released in Japan in 95, America and Europe in 98. This is Bomberman Gb2 in Japan, because Bomberman Gb1 in Japan came over as Wario Blast featuring Bomberman.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of
Oh,
sense
of course
anyway,
it's
but
hard
still.
to find that answer.
Yeah, and it does make sense that the impetus would come from essentially from America, because in America, Pokemon has hit, and there is this like, oh hey, let's release other stuff to, the rising tide lifts all boats thing. Let's get a few more boats out there on the water.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but of course, Pokemon hadn't happened yet in the UK, Europe, so it's kind of like it isn't does quite make sense here, but it does make sense if it's just they're following NOA's lead, and that's why NOA did it. So there we
Yes.
overall, I think a 5 probably for a more out of that's a cute little Indiana Jones Bomberman though.
Yes, that new giant shiny new release sticker.
Yeah, so I remember hearing about that, in the sort of other like podcasts and things, talking about what happened, especially in the US when Pokemon just kind of reminded a lot of people that the Game Boy existed, and
Oh yeah, 1998. Guess what's out everywhere but Europe?
yeah, exactly.
So, what was the number?
Just go with a 5.
Okay. Mickey Mouse Magic Wands.
Yeah, I've absolutely nothing on this. Good lord, Mickey Mouse magic wands.
And don't forget the exclamation point.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, we're pumped about these wands. We're not like perplexed. But despite the fact that I am perplexed, but
Would you
yeah.
believe this also has very bad SEO?
Yeah, well, based on what I'm seeing, it was originally released in Japan in 1993, so it's another
Yes.
bit of North American.
It's in the Crazy
necromancy.
Castle series.
Yeah, which Crazy Castle was just basically this blank slate that was just waiting for, like, 'cause Bugs and
Yeah.
Garfield and loads of stuff has had that.
Um.
Just basically necromancy at the altar of Pikachu for North America, when that said altar had not been set up yet in
Yes.
Europe. So
Oh, great. It got a. Wait, am I saying this right? That it only came out in Europe in Germany?
well, we've talked about this a little bit
Mickey
before.
Mouse v. Zauberstab. I don't know how to speak German in the slightest, but yeah,
No.
this is
No.
very much a.
I love the way that it's like the
Yes.
I see, was because it was did they actually sort of numbered it in Japan?
Yeah.
As Mickey Mouse 5?
Yes, they called it Mickey Mouse 5 because it was the 5th Crazy Castle game.
Ah, okay. Well, I mean, it's all terribly interesting, but for being a dredged up Crazy Castle game from the early 90s, even though maybe it's a perfectly solid sort of exponent of the Crazy Castle formula, it's a 4.
Okay. Last Game Boy Black and White game for the year, Legend of the River King GB.
Is this connected to Harvest Moon somehow, or?
Yeah. It's also Natsume.
Ah, I see. Yeah, again, other than that, I really, I'm not kind of particularly familiar with it. But any kind of pointers?
I haven't played the Game Boy one. It's fine. Like the series is generally fine. It's regarded as fun. It's like the most. This is. It's like a fishing adventure RPG.
Mm.
I do not know how that works out on Game Boy Black and White. Has this been re-released?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Because Natsume has always wanted to re-release their entire catalog on VC and been very adamant, or been very vocal, that Nintendo will not let them. Because they have a lot of games.
Yeah, they've.
Yeah, it was on 3DS.
Well, there you go. Yeah, well, there you go. Well, that's kind of interesting. It sounds it sounds pleasant, but probably a little bit held back by, you probably can't quite get the full effect of it seeming, at being as pleasant
Yes.
without the color and all that. So perhaps a 6 for that one.
Okay. On to the launch of the Game Boy Color, Tetris DX.
Yeah, so again, I mean, this is one of the cases where it's more forgivable. Like
It's
the whole,
Tetris and it has color. Yep.
yeah, it's just like we could do color Tetris, and it's like we launched Tetris and the Game Boy together. Of course, we kind of just do bring back the pairing for a GBC launch. Like, makes perfect sense. As I've not played it, but I think it's generally sort of a pretty good version. So I think an 8 for that one.
Okay. Game & Watch Gallery 2, which is the third Game & Watch collection on Game Boy. This is Game Boy Color only, and it supports Parachute, Helmet, Chef, Vermin again, Donkey Kong, and Ball again.
Yep, so I guess with Vermin and Ball were in the non-Mario one.
They've been in all of them so far.
Oh, they've been in all of them, bloody hell. I guess it's just, as we've discovered with their inclusion on Mario and Zelda Game & Watches respectively, these are just, like, indispensable.
Yes.
But this, I mean, I believe, wasn't this black and white in Japan?
I
think it was.
I think it might have been, yes.
Yeah, so it was it kind of, by virtue of taking a little while to come over, it turned.
They enhanced it, yeah.
With something similar with Wario Land 2 in terms of it being like a cartridge that was like enhanced on GBC or something, that kind of thing. But
Pokemon Red or Pokemon Yellow did that, where Pokemon Yellow was a Game Boy Black and White compatible game, but it had one color at a time, like one color per screen, and that color would change if you played on a Game Boy Color or higher.
Yeah, so it wasn't the same as just putting any old Game Boy cartridge in a color. Where, we'd add colors from a few different selectable kind of palettes, but it wasn't really color proper being added. But with this, I mean, the color does help with doing when you're doing Mario kind of add in those characters and into the modern versions of those games and all that. It is nice. And I played it a fair bit on Virtual Console and enjoyed it. Obviously, it's at a sort of appropriate price and format.
Yeah, for Virtual Console, absolutely. But like, here's where I'm at. We've seen Vermin and Ball a bunch, and they're not good games. Chef isn't particularly interesting. Donkey Kong, I believe, was unlockable. It wasn't even presented up front, even though that's the best game on the collection. What is this
about? Yeah, it's
yeah.
been a while. Yeah, I think a 6 for this. It's tough to balance all the things with it in terms of but the fact that I think especially for people probably just looking for something to play early on GBC, it probably would have been more acceptable.
That makes sense.
Goes on, maybe a bit less.
What about Pocket Bomberman, the third?
As opposed to the other.
As opposed to GB, because GB means Game Boy Black and White, except for the next game where it doesn't. And Pocket Bomberman is the color version, also not to be confused with Bomberman Hero.
I think that again, is there an element of this? I'm just trying to think. Like, because obviously Game Boy Pocket was in Japan in '95. Well, I think it was everywhere in '95, right? But I guess like I'm just trying to think: is this Bomberman game like come from the Pocket like era? Or is it just the Pocket monsters, like kind of?
Yes, in
Brands, Juju.
So this is this was released in Japan in December 1997 for the Game Boy, and then they re-released it in 1998 in Japan a second time with the same name, for the Game Boy Color as a launch title, and that is also when it came out in Europe. Because Europe gets the Game Boy Color, I think, like within 2 weeks of Japan this time.
Yeah, see that.
It's like November 1998.
That was kind of an interesting wrinkle of it, the fact that I guess again maybe it was because there was a little bit of a vacuum because there hadn't got to the point where the whole Pokemon.
Oh yeah, they needed an injection of interest in Europe, whereas in America you couldn't keep these goddamn things on store shelves. These things that came out better part of a decade earlier.
Yeah, so it's because like I guess it's like with probably with Pokemon, it's such a multimedia. Even then, like it was a multimedia sort of machine where everything's got to be set up just right, you know. And so you couldn't just say, "Oh, it's blown up in America. Like, let's go. Like, next month." Or something, like I can understand why it took till '99 to kind of get there.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I guess it's like, well, we should. First of all, it's coming, so like this won't be in vain. Like we're kind of almost. Like,
oh yeah.
These are like seeds that are going to really bear fruit when Pokemon blows up, hopefully next year. But also, it's something that we can have in the meantime. So, yeah, it kind of another one. The shadow of Pokemon that just looms so bloody large here. I just have to go with a 5 again.
All right. Fun piece of trivia about the Game Boy Color. Do you want to hazard a guess in $1998 what the MSRP of the color was in the US?
So yeah, just at the time.
At the time, at launch, what did it launch at?
Oh, I do. I think I can recall something about what the Game Boy was. The Game Boy at the time $70 or something. Like maybe it'd come down to that or something. The Game Boy. So yeah, what would the GBC have been? I don't know, maybe $90 or something.
70 still.
Still 70. Wow.
Which is about 120 modern dollars.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is that the GBC, it had color. It wasn't like something like crazy jump forward in terms
Oh
of
yeah, no. And the Game Boy had launched at 90. Right, the original Game Boy.
That's probably why I was thinking maybe,
And that was 89, yeah.
Yeah, you've had the better part of a decade, but I guess like I'm sure they weren't taking a loss at all.
Oh no, this thing was so cheap to make.
You could have imagined them charging more for it all the same, because like, especially with the US with things heating up.
Japan and America had Pokemon well entrenched by the time the color launched.
Yeah.
And of course, people needed the color to play Gold Silver, and they knew that they would need that.
Yeah, so it's nice that it was so kind of affordable, but for whatever reason at this point I was just kind of, I guess some of it was the fact that you had these like years of kind of rumors about when they were going to do like the next real kind of step forward, and then that got with Atlantis or whatever.
Yes.
And then that got totally kind of blown up by what happened with Pokemon and
they're like, oh shit, people still take low spec things.
Yeah, so it kind of, even though it was affordable, and with Pokemon blowing up and some of the other games that came out around that, I was quite tempted to like get a Game Boy Color at some point in the late 90s, but especially with the cost of importing stuff and just the fact that it was like, well, it can't be that far away. I held firm and probably deprived myself of a lot of affordable fun in the process. That's the way I played it back then.
And then lastly, the one GB that doesn't mean Game Boy Black and White, Harvest Moon GB, which actually was only for the color.
Yeah. Like I said, the Metal Gear, like the Ghost Babe, but he was doing the Deadly Silence thing, but it's Capcom didn't invent it.
Of course not.
That was for GBC. They could have had Ghost Babel something beginning with C, but they didn't. So with Harvest Moon, how well does it, or did it translate to the GBC?
I mean, not well, but this was one of the first, if not the first, game of its style on in a handheld format.
Yeah, it seems like the style of game and a handheld format is a really good match.
Yeah,
It's just
like
is the Game Boy hardware really capable of
no,
actually bringing it?
it's like this thing really took off in the Game Boy Advance era for a reason, right? Is that you're right that portability plus like easy life kind of slow check-in pace type games fit really well. The catch is the Game Boy was 1986 tech sold in 1989, updated with color in 1998. Like, this thing is not actually high tech. So,
Yeah. So I think with this one, I'll go sort of same as with the River King, go 6 in
okay.
terms of, because I think even with the limitations for people at the time, it was probably, something quite a lot to get out of it.
Yes.
But equally, it isn't. It'll be a while before you can really kind of get the full experience out of it.
Weird how the year that you gave a fuck ton of 4, 5, 6s, and 7s gave an average of 6.0. Weird how that math works out. On to 99. Only one Game Boy Black and White release this year. So we only have three platforms.
But it's a big one.
Oh,
it's the big one.
Maybe, yeah. All right. How about blisters on your palm?
Never played Mario Party, the original. I've barely played Mario Party at all, if you can believe that.
So, this is after, I believe, it came out in America. This is after the scandal in America.
Yeah, because I think Mario Party 2 was 99 in the US,
yeah,
right?
So this is for the youngins out there who somehow haven't heard about people destroying their Joy-Con with the new game because the Joy-Con are not built for this either. You dumbasses at Nintendo.
Oh yeah, Bowser was recently going. Doug Bowser was talking about how these things is like tires or whatever. They get worn down or whatever. It's like, well, don't fucking Mario Party won the game.
Yes, I love to have your excuse of just like, well, just don't use your Joy-Con that heavily. Meanwhile, releases a game that asks you to clock how many full rotations of the stick you can get in 5 seconds, which is an item in the original Mario Party. First of all, there's mini games that have you just spinning, but then there's also how many times can you rotate the stick that has grooves to actively dig into your palm.
It's so. This has got to be one of the most baffling failures of playtesting ever, because you'd think it'd affect playtesters more acutely.
Yes,
than
you would.
In ordinary use cases.
No, because I'm guessing it was just played by the developers in Japan. And the developers in Japan didn't think about how people were actually going to do it. They just probably gripped around the stick and spun instead of letting the top make contact because they weren't children.
Yeah, and
so
it goes, but considering it is essentially, kind of a descendant of the kind of track and field.
Yes.
Style, where it's like, well, how did people play those in the arcades? They did all sorts of bizarre contortions to try and, kind of get the most button presses in that case per second. So it's very easy, I think, to anticipate that this would be a problem. They just simply failed to. Now, how though you go from that to releasing it in a different region a year later,
unchanged.
Wow, I mean it's
fuck European kids.
I can't speak to the merits of any of the Mario Party games terribly well. I mean, I did play a bit of one of the GameCube ones. I think was a friend had a bunch of GameCube multiplayer games that I didn't have, that we sort of WarioWare and that and Soccer Slam and stuff kind of had some fun with it, but never really that much to make a big assessment. I just it crosses my mind every now and again to check something out, but
Don't worry, the
because
series isn't good.
I just like I'm not. I don't have the the infrastructure, so to speak, i.e., social interaction.
I mean, they
to make
have
it work.
online now, but that doesn't mean you should go play it.
Yeah, they do, but it's it's kind of a crutch, isn't it? I mean, this kind of game is meant to be for hijinks,
Oh
in the
yes, it.
same in which it's like we did it back when these games back in '99. Like me, I had a friends group then that we did play. There were same room four player hijinks, but it was GoldenEye, it was Smash Brothers when it came out in Japan, which was just a huge hit
Mhm.
with us, all that kind of thing. It just Mario Party seemed kind of like don't really need that, So I guess, especially given the malpractice with the thumbs and everything, this one can have a 4. I think I'll be more generous with 2, but
Okay. So here is Super Smash Brothers, which
yeah.
released in Japan in January '99, North America in April '99, and Europe in November '99.
Yeah, just a fair bit later. To be honest, I didn't have. It wasn't straight away. I think it was probably maybe March, a little bit before it came out in America. I got the
Mm-hmm.
imported the Japanese version.
And 50 hertz.
Yeah, and I mean, first of all, Japanese version had way cooler sound effects and stuff. Like where I remember like seeing and hearing footage of the sort of other, whether it was the European version or the North American version now. I can't remember, but like it's got these like bowling pin noises and stuff. And I was just like, what? Like, what do they do to it? Like
Yeah.
the lightsaber noise was like toned down for plagiarism reasons or whatever. So yeah, I mean it's I don't think it benefited from kind of be coming over to Europe with the gameplay in terms of the PAL conversion or some of those changes. But like I said, this was such a hit with this was a case of my usual like very very conservative. Like, is this gonna last me a while? Is this gonna hold up? How much is it really gonna be worth the price? I kind of took a bit of a risk because it was people kind of some of the impressions from Japan at the times. It was mostly impressions because like,
Mm-hmm.
it hadn't come out in America yet for full reviews. Were like, it's fun, but there's not a lot there, and all this kind of stuff. So
Right.
it was such a risk, but oh god, I'm so glad I did because we had so much fun with it, and even just I just loved it so much that I do stuff in single player, even though yes, in terms of substance there was very little there, but I just enjoyed controlling the characters so much and just pissing about, put a few AIs on and just fight them for a while because I loved it so much. So, with the compromises, I think, and the fact that it's not a game of the most substance, I think an 8. But God, I mean, the affection for this is just
Mm-hmm.
off the scale.
So the next game is Pokemon Snap, and I want to highlight something about this game. Do you know what I'm about to highlight for you? The weird trivia.
Is something to do with like how they got around? Like in America, they had the whole Blockbuster partnership
Oh
with
no, that's
Dreamcast.
not it. This game came out before Pokemon Red and Blue in Europe. This is the first introduction of Pokemon to Europe.
Wow, that is funny. I mean, I guess it's just one of these things
They
where
just couldn't
if
sit on it any longer, I guess.
because I didn't have Pokemon, and I've been reading about it for years. Like just the first I remember reading about it was like the CVG. I was reading in the mid '90s. They had this like middle section
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of the magazine that like wasn't color, where it was just like sales figures and stuff. Like it was kind of like where basically the personality of the magazine just like checked out for a bit,
Yep.
and this cheap little section where it's just like here's some charts and sales from Japan and America and stuff. And in Japan, it's just like pocket monsters everywhere, pocket monsters, and what the Game Boy Pockets do, and it's like, my God, what is this?
Yes.
This thing that's happening. So I guess the
Yes.
irony of Pokemon Snap coming out before anyone had like legitimately got to play a domestic release of an actual Pokemon game was
Th-
totally lost on me.
I did not believe my eyes, and I researched this for like 20 minutes, and everything I can find is Pokemon Snap released in Europe 1 month before Red and Blue.
That is pretty amazing, but I think it's just a case of how things lined up. But again, bit insubstantial. Reviewed quite well, and it kind of looked nice relatively for the time. But the fact that it did seem a bit frivolous and insubstantial, certainly after taking a chance on Smash Brothers, probably wasn't. Even though it was a chance that paid off, I wasn't necessarily apt to take many more such chances. But played it on Virtual Console years later, and I really quite liked it. It's sort of I do like rail shooting type games, and it is like the most relaxed, cute rail shooter ever. But you can set up the way you could kind of set up these kind of interactions with the Pokemon and all that kind of stuff, even though I didn't really know the characters very well back then. I think I still would have liked it, but yeah, I think a 7 for that.
Okay. Command and Conquer 64.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was vaguely aware of this of being on N64, but didn't really have the background to seriously consider it, having not really played RTS stuff on PC.
And that's why it came to 64, was to try and hit people that did not have that background.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, that's the thing with me. It was always just like, again, in some ways, you might, again, if the price was for these things was lower, you'd probably be more like apt to say like, yeah, let's try something I've not tried before. Whereas a lot of the time, when it's so high, it kind of boxes you into things that you feel safe. Maybe I'll just bounce off it totally. But I don't know like how legit because it's not the easiest. With RTS, is especially like N64 controller, like having a sort of smooth interface for this doesn't seem like the easiest thing in the world.
They did an okay job with it.
Yeah, so tough to call, but maybe a 5 for this.
Okay. Mario Golf 64.
I had this back then, and I very much liked it. It kind of it took me back to I hadn't had a sort of golf game in quite a few years. I think it probably would have been the one of the PGA games on Mega Drive would have been the last time I kind of played a golf game for a fair bit before this, and I really, really ended up getting into it. Played it a hell of a lot. Kind of didn't have the handheld companions or anything. So I couldn't do the whole thing where you could with the transfer pack. It would have been with the N64. You could put your character from the RPG version and play in the N64 game like that. But it was still, and of course, it did lack that kind of more substantial kind of things to do in single player in that way. But a fair bit of multiplayer, but also just kind of some of the single player stuff they had to do. The different sort of like ring shot challenges and stuff. Like I liked it. I thought it was really quite good. So I think an 8 for that.
Okay. What about the new Tetris?
The new Tetris. So yes, what distinguishes this as new and Tetris? I don't.
There's a progression metric to it where it's. I believe this is the one where it's counting your lifetime stats as you're trying to unlock things.
Yeah, that seems almost sort of a little bit ahead of its time.
Yeah.
You get a lot of that, as it goes along. We're trying to kind of make, give people a sense of, that their playing time is kind of worth something. It's working to there's a sort of overarching kind of goal, or something that you kind of working towards as you just play. But difficult to really say how much they brought to it myself, not being a particular Tetris sort of aficionado, and obviously it's not portable Tetris, which is always a little bit of a knock. So the 6.
Okay. F1 World Grand Prix.
Yeah, so I can't help but notice.
What can't you help but notice?
Do we have two of these? So I don't know how we managed this again. Like, couldn't one of them have traded places with a cruise in, and we could have had balance
No.
force or whatever? But no, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure this got covered a fair bit. But I feel it may have been a different F1 game, but I feel like that this first one must have come out in Japan or something a fair bit before.
This came out for 64. North America, July of this year, or July of 98.
98.
Yes, Europe and Japan 99. It looks like.
Right, so it must be a different F1 game I'm thinking of. I feel like there was an F1 game I can remember reading about, probably more like 97, you know, but...
Yeah, no, and then, yeah, the sequel was N64 in Europe only.
Yeah, well, we've often said that they perform abnormally well.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely.
So that would be sort of the reason to go for them.
And it came out on the sequel came out on Dreamcast in Japan and Europe.
Yeah, so yeah, I didn't really have much room for other races, and yeah, sim type races not really my thing.
Fuck if I know anything about the sequel. I know the first game is averagely received.
So I could go a 5 and a 4 just for being in the same year.
Okay, what about Donkey Kong 64?
Oh yes, this is an interesting one.
This one's
I really enjoyed Banjo, but again, DK64 it generally reviewed well. Like if you look,
it reviewed well.
If you looked at the scores and stuff, you might have thought I would have bought it.
So,
just even in the reviews that scored it well, there just wasn't quite. They didn't persuade. It didn't persuade that this was actually, especially again when you've only got so many games that you're going to be able to have in a year with N64. It's like is this really going to be like? I really like Banjo, but do I want like somewhat worse Banjo?
Right.
Less than a year and a half later, it didn't add up to me.
And so, the other thing for younger members of the audience, around the time where the standard for review scores was built off of components. So you would have they were trying to rate things objectively for some reason. And so you would get things like, well, are the graphics good for the era? Well, on N64, objectively, like, yeah, Donkey Kong 64 looks nice.
It's one of the more impressive games around at the time.
It has, a rare soundtrack.
Very, very Banjo. Not like, didn't feel in the DKC lineage really at all.
Yes,
but
very
it's still
Banjo. Yes,
in its own way.
Is there replayability? You bet your ass that's the problem with the game, but objectively speaking, yes, replayability 9 or 10. How much value is there? Well, if you like what you're doing, you're sure going to be doing it forever. So
I think you could see how it's like with the way the kind of the rubric or whatever of the moment it was.
This game is built to review well, or score high rather. That's different.
Yeah, well that's true. But even with that being largely most of I guess like Edge was a bit different at that time.
Yes.
I didn't really read Edge at the time, but not very often anyway. It was expensive. Like they would be more just like, look, we've got a criticism and a score out of 10, rather than the graphics are 92%, but the sound is 87%.
Yes.
Like it wasn't really this kind of conceit of granularity that other publications kind of had. And I think that was probably more prevalent in the early 90s, but we certainly weren't past it in the late 90s. But there was something about the text, when people it just didn't persuade, and so I did get a copy, a Japanese copy, that was dirt cheap many years later, and played most of it. I think. Well, it probably depends on how you define it.
You think?
I saw the last boss. So
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know how many of the bananas that was, or whatever. But,
you mean banana?
Yeah.
Every fucking time. What a cursed game this is, Greg.
It's for me, it certainly did end up being basically what I thought it was.
Which is worse Banjo.
Worse Banjo, yeah. And I mean, I think the main ways in which it was worse was that it just felt more like you had more kind of like, let's have, rather than having this one character with an evolving moveset, you just had these different characters where it's like basically you don't even really use the differences in them all that much of the time. It's more just cover the same ground with a different avatar like that. That's quite a lot of certain challenges anyway. It's just like, well, these bananas are this color, so it doesn't count if you walk over them with this character. You got to go to a barrel and switch and then walk over them again. It just kind of felt like it was straining to justify having different characters, whereas Banjo was obviously it's two ostensibly two characters, but it's one playable thing. And it's struggling to justify. It was just kind of padding the game, and there's still lots of things that were you could, as we sort of already implied, judged to be well done in various aspects. But Banjo had already done them rather well, and there was another Banjo on the way, like after it. And so, yeah, I will say that when I played it years later, it was very nostalgic, weirdly nostalgic, because it's a game you haven't played. And yet it's so similar to games you did play back then that it kind of transported you back to that time while also feeling like playing a new game. It was weird. And therefore it was I felt like, it was worthwhile experience. But yeah, not a great game by any means. I would say it's between 5 and a 6 for me. But maybe a 5.
All right. What else happened in 1998? Star Wars.
Oh yeah, well this was.
Or 1999, yes.
Yes, it happened, all right.
Star Wars. You couldn't escape that double-ended lightsaber no matter how hard you tried.
No,
Star Wars Rogue Squadron.
Years later, Kirby was going to come for you with that same lightsaber. You really couldn't escape it, however much you wanted to. Yeah, I didn't have Rogue Squadron. Except my sort of aversion, my cautiousness with licensed games kind of won out. But a friend of mine, by this time, I kind of connected with more people who had N64s, and I had the chance to play a fair bit of it and kind of satisfy my curiosity, on their system and stuff. So it seemed really cool at the time. I absolutely loved Star Wars, so it definitely caught my eye, and it kind of set the stage for getting Rogue Squadron 2 on GameCube years later. But I'd have to say, it was. I'd probably go an 8 on this one. There's some aspects of it that kind of. I do kind of like the more immediate nature of like a Star Fox, like that's more like an old school shoot 'em up. Whereas this is it's mostly actiony, but it's got a little bit more of like flying, not a simulator, but if you sort of follow me. But I still liked it.
All right, our next game. Somehow Sebulba returned.
Yeah, well, he's yeah. I really like the pod race, the action sequence itself. But never did get this, even though it reviewed relatively well. Mostly because it's like, I have F-Zero X. It's wonderful. I don't really need another futuristic racer. So, Yeah, I feel like I should get around to playing the Switch port just to satisfy my
It's
curiosity
fine. Yeah.
sometime, and just kind of see, what it actually does with the whole futuristic racing
It
thing.
was a
And
decent game for 99.
yeah, so I think say I'll go with 7.
Okay. All right, we were talking about this last year, Jet Force Gemini.
Yeah, so in terms of the absolutely cursed, awful reference that's in this, that's just really, really terrible. It's so terrible. But like they thought, I mean, look, they weren't necessarily entirely at fault, because it's just obviously a lot of people didn't know. But there was a British entertainer at the time,
Mm-hmm.
who's already kind of past his sell-by date, but obviously he would have been famous to the developers, like when they were growing up or whatever, called Jimmy Savile, who was later revealed to be a monster. In short, someone who had abused his position
Oh,
as
yes.
one of in show business to just abuse many people. And but he had this like show and this like catchphrase where he like people would come and like ask him to kind of facilitate things, like for them essentially, and it was called Jim will fix it, and he would give them like a medal that said Jim fixed it for you or something. It was a bit before my time, but it's they thought, the end of Jet Force Gemini, we're going to reference the Star Wars ending
Mm-hmm.
where they get medals, but it's like, we'll put our own spin on it, and we'll have one of the Ewok looking things suddenly do a Jimmy Savile voice and give the medal out the way he would on his show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, even then, it was pretty cringeworthy. And it just kind of felt like Rare being sort of obnoxiously British. Like we're gonna sort of work this thing in that people outside of Britain will not get, and even a lot of the kids, younger than me, that would have played that game, won't get. But it amuses us, so we'll do it. And then obviously years later, and even then, I don't think it was one of those things where people, there was suspicion, but nothing, that was concrete at the time. But they saw fit to do it, and I have no idea how they handle this in Rare Replay. Presumably, it's just stripped out. I fucking well hope so, but because it is at the end of the game, naturally. So I did dabble with it, but I didn't play it to completion. But just again, just them, their self-indulgence really kind of get you to just
Yep.
getting the best of them. Obviously, in a way that they wouldn't have realised, but it's sad that that's one of the things I think of when I think of Jet Force Gemini. I did enjoy the game when I had it back in 99 or early 2000, whenever I played it. But it was, sort of early third-person shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of these things that it kind of is not all the way there yet. I think it probably, especially for my taste, would have benefited if it had been more focused on shooting action and kind of tightly scripted
Mm-hmm.
than kind of some of the more kind of scavenger hunty kind of rare game design of the time that was still in there
Yes.
from the other games they were doing. But I don't think it was entirely unsuccessful kind of stab at this kind of relatively new kind of game. And presentationally, it was pretty strong. Music was quite good for that sort of thing. So I think I'd give it a 7.
Okay. Um. So weirdly, within a month of releasing Pokemon Snap, they released the sequel to that game. Two sequels actually. So
Well, I
we
mean,
get.
it did. To be fair, in that month they expanded the cast quite dramatically.
Oh yes. Now.
It went from like 60 odd or whatever to 151. It's
Yeah. So.
quite a lot of good run in a month.
Yeah, I don't know how they developed this game so fast for 1999, but here we are finally with the European release of Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue versions.
Yeah, well, it's obviously by the time this came around, you couldn't escape it. I mean, it was you know, I was kind of braced for it because, like, you know, obviously I've been reading about this thing for years, and then you know, it blows up in America, and I traveled to America in the sort of late summer of '99 and of '98, sorry, I think, and Pokemon. No, it was '99. I think it was, and Pokemon had really obviously already blown up there by then, and it was just kind of like, okay, this is what, you know, Europe is going to be like, given time, and of course it did happen. But yeah, I didn't play this at the time. Again, I was holding out basically for, you know, a more substantial revision, which did happen, of course, in a couple of years. But I played Pokemon Yellow on Virtual Console, and other obviously Pokemon games have been relatively stable in their design over the years. Sort of a gradual
No.
sort of iterating sort of process that they've gone through, and you know, it's you can't really argue that it is fundamentally pretty damn solid stuff.
Hmm.
So I think I'll go with an 8 for this.
Okay. Now on to Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Color release of Wario Land 2.
Yeah, kind of strange, I've got to say, that you kind of end up dipping twice. I mean, was this just straight color in the US, or how do they handle it there?
I think we also double dipped.
That is, yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah, I mean, we also, like, same with Link's Awakening, which is the next game. Like,
yeah, right. Yeah.
here's games that you've already played, this time in color.
Yeah, with Link's Awakening, it's more understandable in terms of, you know, it's a situation where you're bringing back a game from quite a few years ago. I mean, obviously it's not that many, but especially when you're dealing with a younger demographic, you know, kind of audience and all that. What would it be? You know, '93 was it? So, you know, like 5 6 years, 5 years before the GBC existed, and then 6 years by the time it comes. I mean, that is a fair amount
Yeah.
of time. In Wario Land 2, it's a lot quicker, but we'll go with 8 for Wario Land 2, and
And
then
then,
Link's Awakening doesn't necessarily. I mean, I've only ever played the DX version because I played it on Virtual Console, but it doesn't really seem like it adds that. You know, it ever really
it's,
like
yeah.
enhanced it that much.
It's bug
So
fixes, it's color, it's an extra meh dungeon.
yeah, so I think it can still have a 9, but you know, kind of
Okay.
it's it didn't you know it was just sort of the most exquisite like remaster or whatever that it could have been, but it's
Yep.
still just fundamentally a great game.
Quest for Camelot.
Okay, well, so Quest for Camelot.
Tell me everything you know about Quest for Camelot, Greg.
I need to understand why this is something that NOE is releasing. So, you know, I mean, all these other sorts of things when you're talking about um, Natsume, Hudson, like I get it. Where is Quest for Camelot coming from? That's what I need to know. Let's see. So, action role-playing game developed and published by Titus Interactive with assistance from
Oh,
Nintendo.
we'll get to Titus.
So
Oh, we will
developed.
get to them.
So this is a kind of Eurocentric
Uh huh.
situation. Okay.
James
Titus
came
Fan.
in at a really good time because he knows what's coming up in like 3 games from now.
Oh, I should have known the Harbinger of Doom.
No, I think it was coincidence. I did not message anyone what was going to be, what the games we were going to be talking about today. I think it's just purely coincidence that James hopped in, but this is a good one to jump in on.
Still, you know, it's the fate.
Oh, there
But
he goes. Now he's looking ahead.
uh, so yeah, I really do not know what to make of this, but it does not seem to be persuading me in this very brief period it has of its merits. So I'm going to give it a 4.
Okay. Super Mario Brothers Deluxe.
I have played this version on Virtual Console because they gave it away in Europe at some point. I can't remember the specific like promotion or what it was contingent on, but I don't think I would have purchased it even for Virtual Console price. But they did give it away, and so I tried it, and it's everything you'd kind of imagine when you don't redraw the graphics. Like
Yes.
it's a problem, and especially like it's doing lost level stuff in there as well, and like it is making some accommodations with that in terms of like modifying the level layouts. So it's like it's doing some good, but it can't really overcome the fact that it's just like those are pretty awkward things in the first place, let alone when you reduce the visible play area as drastically as this does. There's some nice additions, like you get like the world map and the time trial like race thing that they did at the Nintendo World
Yep.
Championships. I'm sure was like really fun if you actually had what you needed to do that.
Yes, including other people.
I think overall, I mean, it's obviously you're talking about a classic game and some nice stuff it added, but then some downsides. I think a 6 maybe overall for this. It's
Okay.
kind of harsh, but I think to me that is quite a big deal.
Mario Golf Game Boy Color.
Yeah, so I do have this on Virtual Console. I've played it a little bit, but not as much as the advance version. I played the advance version, but in all cases, kind of years after they were current, sadly, and no transfer pack and all that. But I really like what Camelot did with the golf and tennis games. Fundamentally the gameplay is sort of simple, but holds up well enough that you can kind of go pretty deep on it. And then add in these kinds of single player, create a character, develop a character kind of modes to it as well. I think an 8 is appropriate here.
Okay. And now we have Disney's Beauty and the Beast, a board game adventure. I have just sent you a YouTube video of this game, and I would like you to just click around and find random moments in this video. Just let this one wash over you. This one, when GX saw that this was coming up last week, they lost their mind. This is what James has responded, "Oh God," to in all caps.
Yeah, well, we're
This
in
one...
the process. It's just you've got a few ads, and then we're
Yeah.
there. So it's exciting. All right, let's have a look. Yep, so the Game Boy logo has come up.
Yeah, just click around. You don't have to watch from the beginning.
Yep, let's see. Oh, yeah, we're on the board game. You can see remarkably little of the board at one
true.
time. There's a die has been thrown. That's exciting. Yeah. I mean, yeah, so I guess we've got clearly a Game & Watch game here. I think it's the fire one, isn't it? Yeah,
Yes.
It's just
So...
like stealth Game & Watch gallery, but it's a board game.
So this is single player Candyland, except when you land on the spaces, you get a bad Game & Watch minigame like Mario Party. And Nintendo put this one out for the same price as Pokemon.
That's the thing. Sometimes I have to like remind myself that this is not just like selected things from that year. Like it's like no, NOE put this.
Do you want a really good punchline on this? So did NOA.
Wow. Okay. Well.
That's how James knows, because James discovered this bullshit.
Oof. Yeah. A 3, I guess. Just what else can you really say? Just bizarre. But I guess it's just one of these things where hardware is relatively new, and you feel like you've got to punch it up in some way.
And then the Walt Disney Company comes knocking with Beauty and the Beast, and you say, "Yes, sir."
Yeah, we'll take that.
Speaking of, Mickey's Racing Adventure for the Game Boy Color.
So how connected is this with Mickey Speedway that is coming later for N64? Yeah.
I know they're connected. I forget exactly how.
Yeah, I mean, because again, we've seen quite a few kind of things. Rare did Mickey Speedway,
Yep.
and see a lot of their games have got some sort of junior equivalent on Game Boy from various places. So
Yes, it's just that this one came out at least in Europe first on Game Boy Color.
yeah, it was quite late, wasn't it? The Speedway game, anyway.
Oh yeah,
So
that was 2000 in Europe.
I think a 5 for this one. Not a lot to go on, but
Um,
I'm gonna guess you're firmly in that line of junior kind of rare versions, which
yes.
have not been particularly charitable towards so far.
And once again, somehow Sebulba returned. Here's the Game Boy Color version of Episode 1 Racer.
He had a secret base full of pod racing engines, just
Yes,
there, just waiting to be reawakened.
yeah, a whole civilization of ships and everyone enough to pilot the ships.
Yep. It's is there like a force sensitive Doug in the Star Wars canon?
Yes.
Probably. I'm gonna
Yes.
guess.
Also,
I've
thank you for knowing the race off the top of your head.
Oh, you've no idea how many times I've seen those films. It's many times.
Yes, I believe one shows up in Clone Wars.
And it is one of the times where it is mentioned, because a lot
Yes.
of the time with Star Wars, some of the names are not mentioned on
And you have to
screen.
find them in auxiliary materials, yes.
And in those cases, I'm much less likely to know because I've never been that much in auxiliary. But in terms of if it's in those movies, I probably will remember it because I've just seen them often enough for that to be true. Yeah, I can only imagine this takes the razzle dazzle out.
Oh, completely.
So
At least it has color.
we'll go with a 4.
Okay. Shadowgate Classic, not Glassic. Whoops. For Game Boy Color.
So, yeah, I mean, Shadowgate, I can certainly remember reading about. I think it's a Super Nintendo version of Shadowgate.
I think so.
Yeah, that reviewed all right, but I mean, so I guess you have to, it's more of a PC game, right? And then
Yes.
kind of must have been a respectable port to console, seemingly. And so I guess just in terms of from buttons and a D-pad point of view, you could get it on portable, okay, but still, like the loss of like the whole kind of moody vibe that it was giving off when I remember reading about it. And again, all of this, a lot of this is stuff you had to. You had to make up in your own imagination when you're reading games that you never played.
Yes.
So I could be way off base here, especially with the memory getting bad, but it doesn't seem like the most natural fit. So I'll go 5, but
Okay.
it's very much a guess.
The prequel to Mickey Mouse 5, Bugs Bunny 3.
So, yeah, Crazy Castle is back again.
Yes, last year they put out 1993's Mickey Mouse Magic Wands, in 1998. Now in 1999, up-ported for color, is Crazy Castle 3, with this time with Bugs Bunny skin.
Up-ported for colour, but it's I'll go with the 4 on that, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I've never played a Crazy Castle game, to be honest. I do remember it being a little bit of a punchline,
Yes.
with magazines, that actually would point out to you that this was the same game as X, Y, Z, whatever.
Yeah. R-Type DX.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know how great a port this is. Again, I mean, it's disadvantages, like straight off. I mean,
Viewport, number of things on screen, yes.
Yeah, so, and that's kind of a big deal with R-Type, which is pretty bloody difficult in its sort of natural state.
Yes.
So, I mean, I guess you could either kind of neuter the game speed or something to kind of compensate that. Although R-Type is always quite deliberate. Paced shoot, of course, but which is one of the reasons why I kind of like it more, even though it's still really, really hard. It just doesn't overwhelm me in the way that other shooting games do, when they might actually be easier, but it's just like everything's going so fast. But yeah, I don't think this is a particularly great version. Although it's it's kind of I like the idea that Nintendo in any region published an R-Type thing.
They
But
published the R-Type arcade game.
oh,
They have lineage with that. That was in like 83, 84.
oh, but that's a bit early for the original R-Type, isn't it? That's
Was
I
it?
thought it-
They
I thought it was
published
like-
the original R-Type in arcade in America. R-Type arcade. When was that? That was 87.
Yeah, I thought so. It's because it's quite quite striking,
Yes.
for a game from that time. But
Yep.
no, I didn't know that. That's interesting that they actually have a little bit of history there. But I think a 5 probably is appropriate for this.
Okay. Just a little bit lower than the previous year, and I think we know what game did that.
Yeah.
Even with Zelda and Smash and Rogue Squadron and two Mario Golfs, Beauty and the Beast had to come in and just put it under a 6.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
They made the decision to put it out.
Yes, 2000. Only 14 games here.
Yeah.
But
we've
Pokemon.
We've hit the wind down now, haven't we? Winded down. But
We've hit the
also-
wind down of everything except for Pokemon, which is going full speed ahead.
Yeah, the share of total releases is just kind of remarkable, isn't it? I guess.
Yes.
But,
Uh,
Pokemon Stadium, I did not play naturally. I didn't have, a Game Boy to build up my monsters to play with other people.
Yes.
It very.
It
much
has
was-
mini games, but yeah, just mini games.
Yeah, and there was a version, at least now, that didn't even have all the Pokemon in it.
That was Pokemon Stadium 1 in Japan. This
So
release.
they rushed it so
Yes.
much in Japan. It's just like, look, we haven't even got all the Pokemon out, but just get it out the door quick.
Yes, this is
Okay.
Pokemon Stadium 2 in Japan, which came out here as 1, and then their release of 3 was our 2. So this is
So yeah,
like the Final Fantasy bullshit.
yeah. So on that basis, so if it had been if that version had come out in Europe or something, it would have probably had to get both barrels. But yeah, I think I go with a 5.
Okay. Mario Party 2. This one wasn't a fucking as much of an insult as 1 was.
Yeah, so it definitely gets points for not having the controller destroying and hand destroy, mutually assured destruction of hand and controller sort of thing, especially when you had the data available.
I love releasing my game in America, having to ship people a glove in America, and then releasing the game in Europe.
It's certainly got that on its side, but I've not played it. Again, maybe I could mess around with it. So it's coming to expansion pack, isn't it?
is.
Even though it's kind of like a non-trivial part of the latest Mario Party game is Mario Party 2 stuff. So I mean, I could actually try that online or something and have a more informed view.
Oh no, the netcode on that.
I'm sure it won't be great. I mean, what I've played of expansion pack online stuff, or just NSO in general. And you talk about with someone who's, especially by US geography terms, is rather close. It's like fine for quite a lot of the time, but then when it hits a hitch, it's gonna take quite several seconds.
Oh
for
yes.
that to pass, and so certainly in these sorts of games, I can understand that being an issue. And then of course, if you other people, different use cases, it might be quite a lot worse with the greater distance or whatever. And especially if you're going 4-player, more different people connected again. So
Disconnecting from Ethernet to Wi-Fi so that I can get perfect dice rolls by going frame by frame.
I think I'm sure I probably would have had a certain amount of fun with this if I had it back in the day. Just not as much fun as continuing to play Smash Brothers.
Oh yes, all the good games.
F-Zero X and all that sort of stuff. I'll give it a 6.
Okay. Ridge Racer 64.
Yeah, this is. It just feels
50.
like it's so kind of late. It's so kind of after the ship had sailed. You know what I mean? It's just
Oh
like,
yeah,
oh yeah, we got that thing that's associated with PlayStation. It's on N64 now, and it's like, you know,
and it's still 50 hertz.
yeah, it's still that problem as well. I think it can have a 5.
Majora's Mask.
Yeah, so and I do want to mention I've not played a great deal of Ridge Racer. I don't know how
Hmm.
well that stacks up in the sort of lineage of Ridge Racer games, but it's mostly just for the fact that it's kind of cultural kind of cachet. It kind of it hadn't come and got, but I assume it was meant to generate some sort of thing of like oh, it's jump chip, we've got it, it's jump chip or something, and it's like if that was ever going to generate any buzz, it wasn't in the year 2000. So yeah, Majora's Mask. Yeah, I had the N64, the American N64 version of this back in the day. So not the Japanese version. I didn't go crazy importing something I didn't really, because it was several months, wasn't it? It was like April in
Hmm.
2000 versus the holiday season elsewhere. And of course, this was the thing. To be fair, they did pretty much. They had Ocarina and Majora were both coming out basically simultaneously in Europe with America, which was a good step forward from other such releases, and it kind of enabled there to be, kind of like one of the relatively few games, Ocarina anyway. I'm not so sure about Majora because again, I think the ship had sailed a bit, but where like you'd see it advertised on TV, and like stores would have promo stuff out, cardboard standees, as like there was actual hype for Ocarina of Time in Britain. So it kind of felt nice to be able to participate in that while I hadn't already played the game, or just nobody gave a shit because N64 wasn't that big. And there was a little bit of that still around with Majora, but of course N64 was long in the tooth by this point. But I really really liked it. It has, I mean, some of the rough edges, I guess, were a little bit ironed out from the Japanese version, but there's still quite a few in there that would go on to be addressed to a fair extent in the 3DS version. Though, again, not to everybody's taste, I'm sure. But yeah, it just a strikingly kind of different take on Zelda in a number of ways, while being like really really close to Ocarina in another way. But in terms of like the assets, the characters, and various things. But I just really really loved it, and especially the kind of melancholy, like impending
Hmm.
doom thing. It just that appeals to my sensibilities. So I think
Yes.
a 9 for that one.
Okay. Mario Tennis 64.
No, I had this on the back of Mario Golf being so nice, and probably doesn't work as well as a kind of single player game as Mario Golf did. There was more stuff to do, and golf is just kind of more extensive sort of sport. With this, it was much more dependent on being able to play multiplayer. But in those days, like I said, I had that luxury and did have quite a lot of time playing Mario Tennis multiplayer. Not necessarily rising to the level of Smash, or something like that, but still, it was it's simple, it's easy for people to pick up. So it's not like the case where because I own it, and I'm just gonna like completely be on another level from other people, and it just kind of fucks the whole thing up. Like everybody can play it. It's easy enough to pick up. It's tennis, so everyone's got a built-in knowledge already. It worked really quite well in that regard. So 8, and it gave us Waluigi, of course.
How could we ever forget? Mickey Speedway USA. 50
Yeah,
hertz.
aforementioned Mickey Speedway USA didn't really review that well over here, to be honest. Which is I always felt like the rare games tended to get pretty good review. I mean, pretty good reviews everywhere, but probably always a little bit of a bump here because the magazines actually had access to them and could talk to them, and have like pre-release showings and stuff to kind of probably improve their opinion of the games in some cases before it came out anyway. And then you kind of see it in a little bit of a different context when you do review it. But this one, not so much. So, yeah, I mean, again, I had enough racing games, I guess, but to really give it any serious consideration. But I think a 5 for this one.
Perfect Dark.
Oh yes, now this was again another big hit. Once this got going, yeah, it was I had this round about my birthday after a very major sort of summer of exams. So it was like all these relatively, at least up my life up to that point, important exams. You got to get those out of the way because Perfect Dark's at the end of the tunnel. So I enjoyed it a great deal, and especially the multiplayer. I mean, really, that went down so well. It was just so much stuff. It was just they just put so. Whereas famously, at least in retrospect, the GoldenEye multiplayer was a little bit of an afterthought that just kind of blew up. When they didn't necessarily think it would, or it was that important. Having happened, Perfect Dark multiplayer, they just threw everything they could think of, seemingly all these, the sim opponents and the way you could order them about and the weapons and the levels and everything. I mean, it was just, having played quite a lot of GoldenEye, it's a way in multiplayer. Perfect Dark kind of showed how thin it was. Because okay, this is what happens when you actually do that, but make it a priority, and we loved it. It was so much fun. Single player, I was less warm on. It was still cool. Like it had like lots of interesting weapons and scenarios and things. I mean, there's a retroactive on this that covers with multiplayer as well in a separate episode. But the single player, my thoughts on it. I still liked it, but I guess I don't know. It wasn't. It didn't sort of. I get there was a novelty for me with GoldenEye because I hadn't played a lot of FPS games, and especially with that whole mission thing, mission objectives and all this stuff, and it just kind of wasn't there with Perfect Dark. And so even though it was kind of bigger, better, badder in most ways, and they kind of it just, especially compared to how much better the multiplayer was than GoldenEye, the single player seemed kind of a low impact by comparison. But
Yep.
I still liked it, so I think an 8 for that.
Okay. Pokemon Yellow Special Pikachu Edition.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a sort of another kind of shameless cash grab when you consider that you already had multiple versions.
Yes, but this one is anime influenced and it has Jesse James and Meowth, and Pikachu follows you everywhere. So
Yeah, exactly. It's basically like how about the series had blown up to be big enough that it's like the game should incorporate that instead of the series being obligated to imitate the game, and especially I think probably in the West the series blew up probably faster than the game did in some quarters anyway. So it only made sense, and it's still it's the version I've played of that generation, Virtual Console and stuff. So I'd give it an 8.
Pokemon Trading Card Game.
So yeah, I mean, I think there was a retroactive.
Yeah, were you a part of this retroactive, or was this?
I was not a part of this one, but I wish I could remember more of it, of the substance of the game. Because it's not something I'm familiar with.
It's an RPG, like Pokemon, but in this game, you go around and instead of battling in Pokemon, you battle in Pokemon cards, like the real world card game.
Yeah, it's kind of again, it's such a just product of how ridiculously big and how quickly, crazily, but the Pokemon got. But you have to, for me, it was obviously much too early. I hadn't got like indoctrinated into Pokemon yet.
Yes.
But, so it's kind of hard to score from that point of view, but maybe a 7.
Okay. Like, the thing about all 4 Pokemon games released in Europe in 2000 is every single one is a reaction, was developed as a reaction to the overwhelming success in other markets.
Yeah, exactly.
Pokemon Stadium, Yellow, which is based on the anime, Trading Card Game, which is obviously based on the success of the card game, and then we'll get there in a second, Pinball.
Yeah, which is all stuff that, hadn't really fully played out in Europe, but it's just like, look, well, we've got every reason to think it pretty much will play out this way.
Yes.
So let's get there. And again, it's what the triumphs of Pokemon and how it got, sold outside of Japan is just that choreography of sequencing all these things, so that just to kind of, sometimes if you can project, you can act like something's a big deal, you can make people believe it's a big deal.
Yes. All right, last game before you have to go for the night. Game & Watch Gallery 3. And I will have you know, they resisted including Vermin and Ball in this one.
Oh, that's a model of restraint.
Yes.
Should be said.
So we have Egg, Greenhouse, Turtle Bridge, Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong Jr., Judge, Flagman, Lion, Spitball Sparky, DK2, and Fire. So, like, the last ones were like, here's 4 games. This one is like, alright, these games take up no space. Let's just actually give people more.
And then when you get to, like, the GBA one, it's got loads of stuff, hasn't it? I
Yes.
haven't got around to that, but I think it's, but a lot of stuff kind of getting packaged together there.
Yes,
but,
it's just those first 3 that are just, like, insulting, that it's like, pay for 3 Game & Watch games, please.
No, again, it's weird. It's just like, we all know Nintendo's very studious about preserving the value of things, but preserving the value of individual Game & Watch units is not really a priority.
No.
In the mid to late 90s. But,
yes.
This would be another one that I played on Virtual Console. I think it's definitely the one that I got the most out of. I enjoyed them all, but you're not thinking so much about the individual packages, I guess, when it's on Virtual Console for a few quid or whatever. But this definitely is the more substantial of the bunch.
And there are better games on here, and there are fewer trash games on here also.
Yeah, I guess again, some of it is just like probably adherence in the earlier case to the things that they think of as being like historically important or whatever, rather than just like, well, actually this is more
enjoyable. Yeah,
it was more interesting and worked better. But it's like, oh yeah, but that's not what people remember.
Yes, still no Super Mario Brothers, still no Zelda.
Sure, but I think I'd go with a 7 on this one.
Okay. We can do one more. Pokemon Pinball.
Not played this. Not played it. I played the GBA one because that was on Virtual Console for Wii U, and it was quite good. But a lot of people seem to think that Pokemon Pinball, the original, was better. For whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure.
It's a lot of first of all, it is that early in the zeitgeist. Like, it is just like, this is a thing that has Pokemon on it right when Pokemon is at its absolute hottest. Yeah. Well, I guess it's actually a little hotter now, but at the time, like, during that first huge wave. And then also, like, genuinely, for a Game Boy Black and White game, this thing is pushing the Game Boy Black and White really, really well.
It had the special cartridge, was like Rumble in it or something, right? And all this kind of stuff. I mean, I really like pinball. I really quite enjoy video game pinball. I kind of think the sort of how you could incorporate, as they did in the GBA game, I assume was also true in the original Game Boy game, the kind of acquisition element of Pokemon.
Yes.
Into it, kind of into like a macro kind of goals and stuff. It just seems like a good fit. And also, I probably, I don't know whether this will ever come back in like an NSO type scenario one day or what. I'd certainly like to try it. But I have a feeling I'd like it quite a lot. So I'll go with an 8, but it's kind of a midpoint.
Okay. And then when we return, and TBD when that day is, maybe next Wednesday, we will begin with Bionic Commando Elite Forces, so remember to look into that one.
Yeah, it's the NST one with the really small play area.
Yes, it sure is.
I remember Johnny quite liked it, but I didn't get around to playing it. I played the black and white one on Virtual Console, which has redrawn sort of
Yes.
proportions. It works quite well, but maybe that works well too. I guess we'll see.
And I will add more sheets after 2003 because we're starting to push up against the amount of history that I've tracked and written so far.
Hey, we're in the 21st century at least.
We're in the 21st century, yes. We are not at GameCube for 2001 because that was 2002 in Europe.
That's right.
But GBA is going to launch next year, so not all bad.
Well, GBA was the first platform that I actually got in the UK release of since the NES. So I was actually this is where me and NOE kind of reconcile.
And then 2002, we get 2 platform launches with the GameCube and the Pokemon Mini.
Did that actually come out?
It sure did. So please get ready for Pokemon Zany cards.
Well, Pokemon Zany. They used the word zany in a title.
They sure did. So thank you. We will be back next week. Again, not Thursday next week because it's US Thanksgiving, but we'll figure it out. I'll message it on my Twitter. Thank you so much, and talk to y'all later. Bye.
Bye.